Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into it, tackling maybe the biggest question there is. Why do we do what we do? Why kindness one moment and maybe cruelty the next? What's behind our best and, frankly, our worst actions?
It's a huge question, right? And that's exactly what Robert Sapolsky dives into with his book, Behave. He basically throws out the idea of simple answers. He argues every single thing we do, good or bad, is the result of this incredibly complex chain of causes.
Right, and that's our plan for today. We're going to trace that chain. We'll look at behavior, but backwards, starting just a second before an action happens, then zooming out, way out. Hormones, environment, childhood, even our evolution thousands of years ago. It's a really cool way to think about it.
Exactly. Start tiny with brain signals and just keep stepping back. It's a proper deep dive into why we act, showing how nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in a vacuum.
Okay, let's get started then, right at the edge of the action. Seconds before. Sapolsky paints this picture of, like, a battle inside your head.
Yeah, it really is a kind of battlefield, and you need to know the main fighters. Basically, what you do right now often comes down to a tug of war between two key brain areas. First, you've got the amygdala, super fast.
Okay.
It handles fear, anger, strong emotions. It's all about immediate, impulsive reactions. No thinking, just reacting.
That's the bit yelling, punch back or run away when something startles you. Pure emotion, pure speed.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And pushing against it, you have the prefrontal cortex, the PFC. Now, the PFC is slower, but its job is vital. It's about judgment, self-control, thinking things through ethically, weighing consequences.
The brain supervisor, maybe. Applying the brakes, telling you to chill out for a second.
Pretty much, yeah, the internal brake system. So if someone cuts you off in traffic, the amygdala screams, react now. But the PFC is trying to say, hang on, is it worth it? What happens next?
Okay, but if the PFC is where reason lives, does that mean we can just decide to ignore the amygdala? Can we just switch it off if we try hard enough?
Well, that's the tricky part. Sapolsky argues you can't just silence the amygdala, you have to manage it. And whether you manage it well depends on how effectively that PFC is working in that split second. Which one wins that neural fight determines what you do.
So morality isn't just thinking about right and wrong in theory.
No, not at all. It's the real-time result of this physical push and pull between impulse and control. And crucially, if your PFC is tired or stressed or maybe just not fully developed yet, the amygdala tends to win often.
That makes perfect sense. And it leads us right into the next layer, doesn't it? If the PFC needs to be strong to manage the amygdala, what influences how strong it is? Let's zoom out just a bit, minutes and hours before the action. This is where hormones, the body's chemistry, start to play a role.
Exactly. And this is where it gets even more complex because hormones don't just make you do things. They change the sensitivity, you could say. They tweak how easily the amygdala gets fired up or how well the PFC can do its job. They basically set the stage.
Okay, so who are the main chemical players here? How do they nudge that brain battle one way or the other?
Well, there's cortisol. That's the classic stress hormone. When cortisol levels are high, it's like a warning signal. Danger, stress. And what it does is it makes the amygdala more excitable.
Or jumpy.
Right. So if you've had a really stressful day, your fear center is already on high alert. It makes it much harder for the PFC to calm things down when something else happens.
So if I walk into a tricky meeting after a morning full of deadlines and stress, I'm already kind of biologically set up to react badly.
You're primed for it, yeah. Then you've got dopamine that's about pleasure, reward, motivation, drives addiction, but also just wanting things.
But maybe the most interesting ones for social behavior are oxytocin and testosterone.
Testosterone gets a bad rap, just linked to aggression, right?
Yeah.
But Sapolsky says it's more nuanced.
He really does. It's not about just random aggression. Testosterone seems to amplify how we respond to challenges, competition, threats to status, but it also fuels things like courage, confidence.
So it depends on the situation. Massively. In a stressful, competitive situation, yeah, maybe it pushes towards aggression. But in another context, it could fuel defending your family or pushing for a promotion. Context is everything.
And oxytocin,
Right.
the love hormone. That sounds purely positive.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But Sapolsky points out a crucial downside. Yes, oxytocin helps us bond strongly with our own group, our family, our team. It builds trust within the group.
Okay.
But by strengthening that us feeling, it automatically ramps up suspicion and distrust of them outsiders, strangers. It can actually make the amygdala more reactive to perceived threats from people outside the group.
Wow. So the same hormone that makes me feel closer to my friends could make me more wary of someone I don't know. It's a double-edged sword. Good for group sticking togetherness,
Yeah.
but also for tribalism.
Exactly. Hormones don't make you good or evil. They just shift the probabilities. They change the internal weather, sometimes dramatically.
Okay, let's widen the lens again. Days and weeks before the action. We're moving beyond immediate chemistry to more recent environmental stuff.
Yeah.
And even just your physical state. How much can something really basic like being hungry or tired actually affect moral choices?
Oh, hugely. Much, much more than we like to admit. Our whole idea of being purely rational thinkers kind of takes a hit here. Sapolsky shows loads of evidence that our ethical compass isn't fixed at all. It wobbles depending on context.
Like what?
Well, simple things. Lack of sleep, being in pain, even just being exposed to constant loud noise, or like you said, being hungry. All these things can seriously degrade how well the PFC works,
Okay.
which means the amygdala, the impulsive part, gets more say.
I definitely know I'm grumpier when I'm tired or hungry, but this sounds like it goes beyond just being irritable. It affects actual ethical judgments.
It absolutely does. And this is where some of the research he talked about is just, well, mind-blowing. There were studies looking at judges making parole decisions. They found judges were way harsher, denied parole much more often right before their lunch break when they were presumably hungry. Seriously, compared to right after lunch when their blood sugar levels were back up. The likelihood of getting parole literally depended on whether the judge had eaten recently.
That's unsettling. The idea that justice could swing based on a judge's glucose level, it kind of demolishes the image of the purely objective, rational decision maker.
It really does. It forces us to accept we're biological creatures. How stable our internal system is directly impacts our ability to make complex, reasoned, ethical choices. If the system's running on empty or stressed out, those higher functions start to break down.
You need to feed the machine to get good output.
Basically, yes. First, stabilize the organism if you want a balanced moral choice.
That idea of the system's stability leads us perfectly from temporary states to more permanent wiring. Let's go further back. Years before the action. If feeling hungry today can sway us, what about the deeper programming, the software that runs underneath? Now we're talking about childhood, right? The lasting impact.
Exactly. This is where the brain is incredibly malleable, like wet clay. What happens in those early years lays down deep neural pathways, blueprints really, that are hard to change later on. It sets the foundation for adult behavior.
So what do those different blueprints look like?
Well, you see a stark, often tragic difference. Kids growing up in really tough environments think poverty, constant stress, violence, neglect their nervous systems, adapt to survive that chaos.
Okay.
Their bodies learn the world is dangerous, unpredictable. This leads to a stress response system, the HPA axis, that's basically stuck in high gear.
Always on edge, ready to react.
Precisely. Their threshold for what counts as a threat gets set really low permanently. They become hypervigilant. So later in life, they might be much quicker to perceive threats and maybe react with excessive defense or aggression because that's what their system was wired for.
And the flip side, kids in safe environments.
Kids growing up feeling safe, loved, in predictable settings, they build stronger connections for empathy, for trust. Their PFC gets more practice, more reinforcement in managing social situations constructively.
So childhood trauma isn't just a bad memory you carry. It's physically built into your brain's architecture, making things like impulse control genuinely harder down the line.
It literally shapes the physical structure and function. It sets up a biological predisposition. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? Early adversity can create an adult who's biologically struggling with the very emotional regulation and ethical decision-making needed to thrive.
It sounds quite deterministic.
It is a powerful influence, but Sapolsky also offers hope. Understanding this means we can see that future learning, therapy, compassion, these things can start the incredibly difficult work of slowly reshaping those circuits. It's not easy, but it's possible.
Okay, from the individual's history, let's take the final biggest leap back, all the way to the history of our species, millennia before the action. Genetics, evolution. How did that deep history wire us for both the good and the bad stuff?
Right. This is the ultimate long view. Sapolsky argues that things like cooperation, empathy, even sacrificing for others aren't just nice ideas we invented. They're biologically evolved traits.
Because they helped us survive.
Exactly. Groups where individuals cooperated, trusted each other, looked out for each other, those groups simply did better. They outcompeted groups of purely selfish individuals. So ethical behavior, in a way, is baked into our social evolution.
So evolution made us inherently cooperative, at least within our group.
Mm-hmm.
But then where does all the conflict, the aggression come from if working together was so key?
Well, it's the other side of the same evolutionary coin. Being fiercely protective of your own group, your us, being wary or even hostile towards some outsiders, that was also a crucial survival strategy.
Why?
Think about limited resources, competition for territory, potential threats from unknown groups. The ability to quickly identify who belongs and who doesn't and to defend your group vigorously was just as vital for survival as cooperating internally.
So evolution basically gave us two powerful competing programs,
Mhm.
one for teamwork and kindness within the group, and another for suspicion and defense against outsiders.
That seems to be the core tension, yes. We're wired for both connection and conflict. And then which program gets run most often? That comes down to the environment, the immediate situation, and crucially, culture.
Ah, okay, so culture acts as the kind of operating system, deciding which evolutionary program to activate.
That's a great way to put it. Culture is the filter, the interpreter.
Which brings us neatly to the final piece, culture and moral humility. How do things like laws, religions, social norms, how do they interact with these ancient biological drivers we've inherited?
Culture provides the structure, the rules of the game. Our biology gives us the capacity for things like fairness, justice, loyalty, honor. We seem hardwired to care about these concepts. But what counts as fair? Who deserves loyalty? What actions demand punishment? That's where culture steps in.
It defines the specifics.
Exactly. Culture tells your oxytocin-fueled brain who is us and who is them. It shapes how we apply those deep-seated biological tendencies.
And looking back at this whole journey from evolution through childhood, hormones, stress levels, right down to that split-second brain battle, Sapolsky draws a really strong ethical conclusion from it all, doesn't he? About how we should judge each other.
He does. It's a profound call for what he terms moral humility. Because when you see the sheer complexity, the layers upon layers of influence behind every single action, you realize there's no simple gene for good or gene for evil.
Right.
Every single person has the biological capacity for both incredible compassion and terrible cruelty. What emerges depends on that whole long chain of factors we've been tracing. So his point is we should be really, really slow to judge.
But understanding all these causes, this near determinism, it doesn't mean people aren't responsible for their actions, surely. Where does accountability fit in?
It doesn't remove accountability, no, but it dramatically reframes it. If an action is the end product of forces stretching back millennia, maybe just blaming and punishing isn't the most useful response.
Koto this.
Sapolsky suggests that understanding the why, digging into that causal chain, allows us to move beyond just retribution. It helps us figure out how to prevent future harm, how to fix the underlying issues rather than just reacting after the fact. He calls for enlightened compassion.
Mercy based on understanding the mechanics behind the action.
Exactly. Mercy grounded in the biological and historical reality of why people do what they do.
That's a lot to take in. A really powerful way to look at behavior. So, summing up this whole deep dive, what we do, who we are in any given moment isn't simple. It's this incredible mashup of our biology, our personal history, our environment, all converging. We're the sum total of everything that came before. Makes you think how little is truly us just deciding in a vacuum.
It does. And here's maybe the final thought to leave you with, something Sapolsky touches on. He's shown us this vast, complex web of factors, genes, hormones, childhood, hunger, all pushing and pulling our behavior, seemingly leaving little room for free will as we normally think of it. However,
Yes.
the human brain has this one unique capacity, self-awareness, the ability to actually think about all these forces acting upon us.
The ability to step back and see the machinery,
Yeah,
to understand our own limits and influences.
precisely. And Sapolsky suggests that that very ability to reflect on why we are the way we are, to understand the biological odds stacked for or against certain behaviors, to contemplate the difficulty of choosing the harder, more ethical path, that awareness, that reflection might just be what he calls the gateway to freedom.
So understanding our constraints is the first step to maybe possibly overcoming them.
Perhaps, at the very least, understanding the deep roots of our actions, both good and bad, seems like the essential starting point if we genuinely want a world with more justice and less cruelty, something to definitely mull over.